This entire gaming PC is running on one stick of RAM. A couple of years ago, I never would have told you to build a gaming PC this way. You buy two matching sticks, install them together, and get the full memory bandwidth your CPU was designed to use. But PC building in 2026 looks very different. The price of RAM has exploded, 32 gigs is no longer an automatic purchase, and more people are starting with one 16GB stick, so they can actually afford the rest of the computer. That saves money today and leaves an open slot for another 16 gigs later. The problem is that you're also giving up half of the available memory bandwidth. Normally, that can be very noticeable and reduce gaming performance, but this PC has a Ryzen 5 7500X3D, and AMD's 3D V-Cache could make one stick much less damaging than most people expect. So today I'm building a compact 18-liter gaming PC with the 7500X3D, an RTX 4060, and one 16GB DDR5 module. Then I'll run it through the streets of Tarkov to find out whether this is a smart way to survive current RAM pricing, or whether one stick is still a compromise you should avoid. Welcome to episode 2 of Built by PYUR, a series where I build complete gaming PCs around a clear purpose, properly configure and optimize them, prove exactly how they perform, and then make the completed system available for one of you to actually buy. This exact PC is available now on the pyurologie Jawa page. For the last few years, 32GB became the easy recommendation for a new gaming PC. It was kind of the standard. It gave you enough capacity for modern games, Discord, browser tabs, and everything else people leave running in the background. Prices were low enough that there was very little reason to consider anything smaller. That's no longer the market we're building in. As I record this, a single 16GB DDR5 6000 module costs about $250. A comparable 32GB kit costs around $450. This isn't even the worst of it yet. AI servers don't use the same desktop modules we install in gaming computers, but the same manufacturers are prioritizing fabrication capacity and investment toward higher margin server memory and HBM. So Samsung expects AI infrastructure demand to keep the overall memory market undersupplied, even as demand from regular PC buyers weakens. We don't know exactly when that changes. Memory pricing has always moved in cycles, and it's eventually going to move again at some point. The problem is that people need computers right now. And that's created a decision PC builders haven't had to seriously consider in a long time. Do you spend several $100s on 32 gigs of RAM, or buy one 16GB module, accept the bandwidth penalty, and add another stick when prices become more reasonable? The reason I made this build is because the 3D V-Cache in X3D chips kind of not fully negates that penalty, but it definitely softens the blow. One DDR5 module still has less bandwidth than two. DDR5 handles a single module better than older memory generations because every DIMM contains two independent 32-bit subchannels, but ideally adding a second DIMM still doubles that total available memory interface. To offset this penalty, I've used an X3D processor here. A standard 7600X without 3D V-Cache will probably lose around 10% of its performance when reduced to one 16GB DDR5 module. The X3Ds on average lose about 3 to 5%. So you're still giving up a little bit there, but not as much. And in this hardware market, finding little wins like that is a big deal. For the motherboard, I have an ASRock B850i Lightning. Budget ITX board is kind of like an oxymoron. This one's a little easier on the wallet than some of the other ones, but ITX boards in general are just expensive. So here are the parts I chose for a mini budget beast in 2026. The Ryzen 5 7500X3D is a 6-core 12-thread 3D V-Cache chip. For memory, I have a single G.Skill Flare 16GB module of DDR5 rated at 6000 CL36. The GPU is an RTX 4060. This is primarily a 1080 gaming card. With DLSS, you can go 1440 in Tarkov no problem. It consumes up to around 100 to 110 watts in gameplay. The low power consumption makes it a natural fit for a compact system. Makes less heat, doesn't require a lot of power. Storage is handled by a 1TB Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus NVMe M2 SSD. It's important to have a pretty speedy SSD with a low RAM configuration. If the physical memory fills up, Windows will move some of that data into the page file. And while an SSD can't replace actual RAM, a faster drive makes that fallback less painful. Cooling comes from a 240mm Thermalright Aqua Elite AIO. It's all going to be built inside a Hyte Revolt 3. It's an 18.4 liter vertical ITX case with a built-in carrying handle. After putting everything together, I fully updated Windows, installed the latest NVIDIA drivers for the RTX 4060, and updated the motherboard BIOS. I set Curve Optimizer to -15, enabled the RAM's Expo profile at 6000 CL36, configured uClock equal to mClock for a 1-to-1 memory controller ratio, and set the F-clock to 2100. It's just a light tune to safely squeeze a little more out of the system. Before we take a look at the performance, there's some important context for these results. If you haven't seen my video covering the latest Tarkov performance update, the short version is that performance started falling pretty heavily on streets and customs, those for sure. I don't know about other maps after minor patch 46777. Even maxed out systems like a 9950X3D with the 5090 are struggling more than they were before, particularly on streets, so keep that in mind. All the numbers you're seeing here are specific to Season 1 patch 46777 and reflect the current condition of the game. With that out of the way, I loaded into an online scav raid and followed my usual streets testing route, starting near Expo and running down the length of Klimov. This is basically the heaviest area of the map, and it makes it useful for testing CPU performance. I ran the game in 1080 using my Pure 60 settings. It's raw FPS, no frame generation here. For the first test, I closed every unnecessary background app so Tarkov had as much of the available memory as possible. RAM usage reached around 14.5 gigs, so basically it was maxed out. The Windows managed page file size was 16.7 gigs with 1.8 gigs of usage. Even though we were maxed out on RAM, I didn't really have any major stutters during the scav run. It was pretty responsive throughout and it was mostly smooth. When I moved around the map during a separate PMC raid, I did notice some occasional micro stutters when entering different areas. It depends on how many assets are in the area, AI, players, all that kind of stuff. Considering the current performance problems with this patch, I can't automatically attribute every one of those stutters to the RAM, but I'm sure some of it's coming from there. The most important thing is that the system never felt like it was completely unstable or really unpleasant to play. So that was the best case test. For the second test, I tried to open apps that users would normally have open during gameplay. So I had Discord open along with some tabs on Chrome. Inside Chrome, I had a YouTube video playing, the Tarkov wiki open, and Bleacher Report running in another tab. I think this is the kind of stuff someone might realistically have running while playing with friends or maybe looking up stuff during a raid. The RAM usage was about the same, completely maxed out. But the page file went up to 19.8 gigs and the usage went up to 3.1 gigs. I'm using a Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus Gen 4 M2 NVMe here. It only has Windows and Tarkov on it right now, so there's plenty of free space for Windows to manage that page file. That is something to keep in mind if you're on 16 gigs and playing Tarkov. I think getting a Gen 4 over Gen 3 makes sense if possible. Even with the additional applications running and more data being moved out to the SSD, the actual gameplay experience felt basically identical. In a real online raid, I could not reliably tell the difference. So yeah, this system really exceeded my expectations. I was expecting the high memory requirement of Tarkov along with the low memory here to create more noticeable hitching or make the system feel like less responsive. But the 7500X3D with its 96 megabytes of L3 cache, that sweet spot DDR5 at 6000, and the speedy Gen 4 Rocket 4 Plus SSD with plenty of space handled the situation much better than I expected. So I just want to be clear, this build isn't intended to remain a one-stick system forever. The purpose is to give someone a more affordable entry point onto the AM5 platform while leaving a direct path to 32 gigs later. Under normal pricing, adding another 16 gig module will be the obvious first upgrade. You'd gain additional capacity, unlock the full memory interface, and probably pick up somewhere around 5 to 10% more performance at most with this X3D. But current RAM pricing has made that upgrade path kind of ridiculous. So I've been mapping out realistic upgrades for the system, and the logical upgrade was adding 16 gigs. But with the resale value of the 7500X3D staying so high, it may actually cost less to resell the CPU and move up to a 9800X3D than it would to purchase one additional 16 gigabyte DDR5 module. Just think about how crazy that is. In this market, upgrading from a 7500X3D to the fastest gaming CPU today could potentially cost less than adding a second stick of RAM. So that upgrade wouldn't solve the capacity limitation, but if the 7500X3D already handles a single DIMM this well, testing a 9800X3D with the same 16 gig configuration will probably produce some really good results. So as ridiculous as a 9800X3D paired with one stick of RAM sounds, that might genuinely be a viable 2026 gaming build. So I guess be on the lookout for that video soon. So here it is, a budget piece for PC gaming in 2026. It's crazy that even an entry-level build has become prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. I think the old days of PC building have already passed us by. So it is what it is, and given the market we have now, I think this is one of the best bang for your buck combinations you can get. The 7500X3D gives us excellent gaming performance and makes up for lower capacity RAM. The 4060 is a great match for 1080, and that single 16 gig module keeps the initial cost down while leaving room for upgrades later. This exact PC will be available for sale on the pyurologie Jawa page. I'll leave the listing and complete specs in the description below, but I'm interested to know which upgrade path you would take from here. Would you buy a second 16 gig stick and move up to 32? Or would you try reselling that 7500X3D and just drop a 98 in there? I think I'd actually drop the 98 in there first before even going to 32. I'm gonna make a video on that and test it. That's what I would do. I'm interested to know what you guys would do. Anyways, thanks for watching episode 2 of Built by Pure. I'll see you in the next one.